Hi everyone and welcome to the Module 1 wrap-up. You'll probably see one of these every module. And the idea behind it is really to address some of the clarification questions. And so I'll address the most popular ones, the ones that get the most upvotes. And so that'll be sort of the primary purpose of these wrap-ups. Like I've maybe said on other videos, the idea is to take the place of lectures where I'm speaking. I'm pointing some things out to you. I'm bringing some things to you, but those are things that you've asked for, or perhaps not quite, depending on how things go. Right? It could be that we get a little bit off topic, but there will be responses to your clarification questions. The second thing I'd like to do in these videos is really just to give you general exhortations probably about the major project of the class. Remember, we've got one overarching class question that you've chosen out of the 3 provided in the syllabus. And as we go through the semester, I will be using some of this time to encourage you to be working on that, and also to let you know a little bit more where I am with or how I understand your progress with regards to the research questions, which are an indication to me on how the bigger one is going. And also twice in the session, we'll have those checkpoints where you'll hand in all the work that you've done for that main project, and that will obviously be a topic that I'll discuss here as well. So that's the idea of the wrap-up video for each module. How are we going with that, as well as respond to the clarification questions. So bring a little bit of instruction, I suppose, beyond what you've read in the text, or maybe pointing you back to the text in more specific ways, and then maybe giving a little bit of a commentary of my own. So that's the idea behind these. That said, then I'd like to actually start with just a quick note about the research questions from this week. This was the first one. They were generally encouraging as a group. On the whole, it looked like you had some good questions. You were doing some interesting thinking around the reading, again, on the whole, for many of you. None of you were quite where I'd like you to be in regards to these questions. Some people got quite close, but none of you were quite there yet. Oftentimes I found myself wanting a little bit more interpretation. So certainly you should be based on the readings that we're doing. And if you've got a quote in there, and as long as you don't sort of have a quote that's completely disjointed from the rest of what you're saying, then that sort of shows a good base for that. I'm looking at a good scope for the question, right? So this is a question that you should be able to have a good stab at answering in about 500 words, about one section of your larger paper. And because we are talking about your larger paper, a third thing that I'm looking for is that it has some value for that towards the answer that you're going to give for that final, for that big overarching class question. Did I mention? I think I mentioned interpretation. So it's scope, interpretation, value for the future, right? Value for the major project. But then also a rootedness, right, in what we're doing right now, right, which is the specific readings of the day. Because of course, and I see this elsewhere, but I'll remind you here, what I'm looking for you to do, of course, with these questions is to then go away and attempt some sort of an answer, to a researched answer, where you've gone on Google Scholar and you've with the question in mind. And that's where scope comes in, right? Because there was a few of the questions where I thought, wow, this is an interesting question, but how would you? I wouldn't even know where to begin to answer it, right? And so I've given you individualized feedback on those, and so please do read that and find that. If you can't find that, let me know, because I want you to get that, because that should help you going forward. Certainly, it should help you with these research question exercises, but these are a small overall part of your grade. What I'm really focusing on is this greater project, which really depends on your thinking and writing now. So that's that. I'd like now to move on a little bit to these questions, to the clarification questions. Let's see if I can remind myself of them. The most popular one was an interesting one. It got me into all sorts of thinking and even into reading, to going back to the Katzenstein piece, which, to be honest, I know a little bit less well than the Huntington piece. The Huntington reading that we did this week was probably the biggest, was maybe the biggest one from my undergraduate days that I sort of remember. And that one of our professors was quite, perhaps David Scott at Brunel University. He's, I think, retired now, but he's an expert in Asia, Asian expert, not in Asia, no. He's an expert on Asian international relations. I did one class with him, South Asia, so states and state making in South Asia, and I did a similar one with him on East Asia as well as an undergraduate, and so Clash of Civilizations was something that I learned quite a lot about in his class, that he would often talk about. So I'm fairly familiar with that one. The Katzenstein piece I've read a few times in connection with teaching this class, which I do fairly regularly, but I'm less familiar with it, let's say. And so I had to go back and read it, actually. It was prompted by this question. Let me read the question to you first. It's the top one there. It says, in what ways is joining the West perceived as a negative? What are the common arguments that societies shouldn't join the Western societies, even though Western powers dominate the global community? This is a good question, and I remember something that it at least reminds me of one of the research questions, right, about, and I don't know if it was yours, Tristan, or somebody else's, but this was Tristan Morales' question. And I think it was more to do with like the spread or the influence of the West in the rest of the world, right? Because one of these major questions that we have for the class, right, is, developing this cadre of civilian experts who can oversee the military, but who can, oversee the military in conducting foreign affairs, right? Conducting foreign policy. We don't want to just rely on the military for foreign policy. We want to have a civilian cadre, right? And so then, if as Americans, right, we're thinking about that, or if as people in America are thinking about that in an American institution, then it's easy to sort of get into the thought that, well, international relations, then it's an American discipline, right? It's sort of designed to help America maintain power, pursue its interests in the global world. And so then, of course, we kind of get into this, well, in pursuing its interests, right? And as we try to help America pursue its interests, if that's what we do, which is it's up for debate, but certainly it's a possibility. Then, should we be inviting people to join the West, I suppose, right? To come and be like us. Actually, this is not the one that got me. Well, it did a little bit, actually. Anyway, so and so first of all, I think I recommended a reading to somebody, and I don't think it was to Tristan. I think it was to somebody else now, but it was sort of a neoconservative reading about America as a sort of a power for good in the world. And I remember being part of a debate once here on campus about is America a force for good in the world? And does being a force for good mean sort of exporting our values and sort of inviting other, being as sort of neutral as possible, but inviting other states to come and join us and to sort of adopt our ideas of human rights, our ideas of democracy and liberty, and economics. And there's an argument there, right, that brings prosperity. If we look at China, this is a little bit outside the reading, but if you wanted to pursue this course of sort of research for your paper, you might look at the work that people do on China economically, right, and the economic progress that they've made and prosperity that's come to China through sort of liberalization of markets. Now, this really gets to the heart of this question, right? What are the common arguments that society shouldn't join the Western societies, even though the Western powers dominate the global community? and I'm reading into this question a little bit to think, well, if they're dominating the global community, then they must be doing something right? They must be quite powerful. They must be quite wealthy. Other people are looking to them. If they're dominating, societies must look to them as sort of examples and that sort of thing. So, and so why not? And there's an argument there, right? That look, China did that. It's certainly not Huntington's argument, right? But it is a little bit Katzenstein's argument. Right? He talks about Sinicization. He talks about Islamicization. One of the things he says about Islamicization is Islamicization. This is at the top of page 28. Islamicization encompasses also other practices, such as the annual Hajj, right, which seems quite Islamic, I suppose, and long-term migration, right, a fully developed consumption culture. And this is the thing that made me think, okay, if we're talking about consumption culture, I think for me, right, one of the first things I would think of before I started to go more deeply into it is, the West, right? Consumption. America, consumption par excellence, right? It's we're a consumer economy. Let's have a look. And so we've got fully developed consumption culture, including, he puts in brackets, including food, dress, and pop culture. The transnational communication channels, radio in the era of Pan-Arabism in the 1950s and 60s, Al Jazeera satellite TV, and websites such as Islam Online today. Islamicization is dynamic and open-ending and defies easy summary, undersimplified labels. So I tend, when I think of the Katzenstein one, I tend to think of that last sort of statement that he makes there, right? Because that's his criticism of Huntington, right? It's dynamic and open-ended and defies easy summary, undersimplified labels. He thinks that Huntington is simplifying and sort of labeling the world, breaking up the world into sort of chunks that really is too simplified. And of course, just a sort of word about international relations before I move on with the question. Some international relations scholars say absolutely that's the point of international relations, right? Is to simplify the world. Ken Waltz was a big proponent of that. If you want to look up any of his work, right, to simplify the world so that we reckon that we're not trying to make a scale model of the world when we're writing our international relations. We're not trying to sort of have every single detail of world affairs there before you on the pages of the books or the articles. No, we're making a simplified model that it makes it easier to understand. Otherwise, what's the point, right? In terms of sort of grasping every single detail of international affairs, well, you could just you'd have to be in the world, right? But the benefit of writing and of theorizing, right, is to simplify the world. So, but anyway, that's what I think of when I think of Katzenstein in relation to Huntington. But the part that just comes before then seems to me to be suggesting that there's already some sort of commonality there, right, between Western civilization, right, in terms of consumption culture, pop culture, food, dress, transnational communication channels, and any kind of Islamic civilization, right? There might be much more that unites the West and Islamic civilizations, and then he does the same with Sinicization, which brings me back to where I began this answer, right, with China and the sort of one way to deal with China in this respect, right, to say that, hey, they've already joined the West, right, is to sort of point to free market economics. But another way, perhaps a less common way, is to do almost the opposite, right? It's to point to the communist past, right? But of course, communism is also a Western political ideology. And in fact, Mao says, when we're talking about Maoism, Mao says that, look, the truth, I think, the truth about the world, the truth about life, it's not found in ancient Chinese cultures, right? Traditional Chinese cultures. It's not found in Western capitalism. It's found in Russian, in Soviet communism, right? Marxist Leninism, right? Which of course is still Russia, well, for Huntington, Russia's in the Orthodox civilization, but of course, Marx was German, right, and did work in England, which, you know, both we would put in the West if we were following Huntington. So there's already an aspect, even China's communism, right? It puts them, if not in the West, then certainly in a different civilization. You know, Confucianization might not be as Chinese as perhaps communism is, right? Or anyway, which itself is imported from elsewhere. So there's already this cross-pollinization. There's already this sort of joining in terms of the question, right? What are the common arguments that society shouldn't join the Western societies? We sort of already have. I mean, if you think of Latin America, which I warn you, I know much less about, right, than I do about Europe. But when I do, you know, the small amount that I do know, you know, Latin America, right, the Spanish and Portuguese culture, right, perhaps violently, I mean, certainly violently imposes itself on the region, but nevertheless, right, that's also from the West, right? The Spanish language, the Portuguese language, the culture is already, not to say it's identical to the West, right? To give Huntington something, but there's already some sort of a global community. Well, and the clue is really in your question there, this global community question. Anyway, I've spent quite a long time on that question and probably no closer to answering it, but I hope that I hope that I point you back at least to Katzenstein and to Huntington. One thing that I think Katzenstein goes a little bit, I think he over eggs it a little bit in terms of Huntington as like sort of a simplified version. Well, one, there's reasons why you might want to simplify things, but two, I mean, Huntington all along, if even just in our reading, our small section of Huntington, you know, he's saying a lot of the time. He's saying, look, I'm not, you know, of course, these are not fixed societies. These are not fixed civilizations that can change over time. Of course, there'll continue to be conflict within these civilizations as well. You know, of course, states are still important. I mean, he does a lot of hedging, right? Because he anticipates the sort of attack that Katzenstein makes on him. He anticipates that, and I think he tries to incorporate that a little bit in what he's saying. So I think we can overdo the criticism of Huntington while still, you know, recognizing that. Well, perhaps it's people who are interpreting Huntington, right, as you know, and sort of which policymakers might do, right, to sort of start to answer one of the questions, right? Policymakers might say, oh, civilizations, that's, you know, they get a one-page briefing, right, perhaps, if that, but then they, you know, they see the maps, let's say, right, with the world broken into civilizations, and they know, okay, oh yeah, Huntington says there'll be conflict along those fault lines of civilizations, which of course he does. But the detail and the nuance of his argument might cause a little bit more caution than, right, well, let's institute a foreign policy based on these different civilizations, right? You know, which might mean let's concentrate our attention, right, on those fault lines between, let's concentrate on Ukraine, for example, right? Let's concentrate on other fault lines in Central Asia, or you know, let's or between China and Japan or something. Let's or between China and Russia, and then when you concentrate on those, of course, then perhaps that brings to pass the things that you're expecting to see because of the simplified understanding of Huntington that you had. But there you go. I think I was looking for something here to give you an example of what I mean by Huntington's hedging. So early on, he's pretty strong, pretty bold, and doesn't hedge very much. You know, he says here, civilization identity will be increasingly important in the future, right? And the world will be shaped in large measure by, no, that's pretty bold. I'm not finding any now that I'm looking for it, but I should have prepared some earlier perhaps, but let's have a look. Yeah. Anyway, look what he says about states. I remember that. He's like, look, states are still going to be important. I'm not saying that they're going to go away. And certainly he says that civilizations can move between, or states can move between different civilizations. Anyway, torn countries, that's the one probably. This torn countries idea, right? This idea of a country that doesn't know which civilization it's in, sort of rebuts a little bit Katzenstein's criticism that, oh, you want to need boxes, right? These are not need boxes. The torn countries, Turkey, what does it have in there? Turkey, Mexico, Russia, I think, is in there. And I mean, Russia is supposed to be the core state of the Orthodox civilization. So if that's a torn state, then anyway. So yes, I think I've spent a little bit of talking there. I hope that I've answered the question a little bit. It might not be negative at all. Joining the West might not be negative at all. Also, countries might have already joined the West, at least in part. And then finally, like in terms of joining the West and this global community at the end that you mentioned, like there's another argument altogether that says, look, this is not about, and this is obviously against Huntington, it's not about the West or Orthodox civilization or Islamic civilization. No, there's just a global culture, right? Culture's global. And yeah, the West is, you know, this is a very modernization theory kind of an argument, but, you know, the West is further along the road at adopting these universal values, and other countries, other civilizations, other parts of the world will also adopt the same. Not because they're Western, not because they're joining the West, but just because that's the best way to do things, right? That's just the universal values. Right? Respect for life and property, that's just a universal value that everybody will, it will, you know, maybe it exists now already in every country, but it'll become more like what we see in the United States or in Britain or France or something. So that was quite a long one. Let's do one more because it was so long. So the next one is Gregory Estrada Burgara. For section 1.2, the author explains how Islam spread across South Asia. I think a lot of, yes, he mentions in particular sort of Southeast Asia. I think he mentions Indonesia there as well, and talks about Indonesia a lot. He says, look, you know, you're associating Islam. He's talking to Huntington. Look, you're associating Islamicization with just a few people who all happen to be perhaps from a certain part of the world, from the Middle East, perhaps, where, look, you know, most Muslims don't live in the Middle East, right? They're in Indonesia. That's the biggest Muslim country. And so, you know, how can you talk about Islamic civilization and not talk about Indonesia, right? That's, you're not doing justice, he's saying to Huntington. To the Islamic civilization. So the author explains how Islam spread across South Asia and influenced the creation of Al Jazeera and many other forms of Islamic communication channels, much like the spread of Christianity and Westernization. Yes. Is this spread the reason of religion or that of political ideology? Does it depend on who or what is doing the spreading, influencing? Yeah. Let's see. What does he say about that? Because again, I guess I answered this in the last one, right? My take on it is that he's trying to make some sort of argument about globalization and perhaps modernity, and how, you know, we already have, you know, it's not the West spreading its values and everybody else sort of resisting, hunkering down, which is what Huntington, I think, makes us. That's a fair interpretation of Huntington to think that that's what he's getting at, right? That the West is influencing and sending out armies and missionaries and TV TV programs, right? And, you know, financial networks that are basically colonizing the world, right? And then others, you know, like the Islamic civilization for Huntington is resisting that, right? Well, Katzenstein said, well, look. It's the same, like they're doing the same things. It's not one way, right? It's both ways. There's communication across borders that's emanating from different. Yes, it's emanating from the West, It's also emanating from the Middle East as well, with Al Jazeera, right? He mentions Al Jazeera, which isn't that Qatar, where that's based. Satellite TV and websites such as Islam Online as well. Islamicization is dynamic and open-ended and defies easy summary. Right, that's the part where I think we often take that reading from Katzenstein, but I think there is this other idea lingering there too. Yeah, he's, you know, what he's also doing. I mean, at the beginning of that paragraph, he's saying contemporary media coverage suggests that Islamicization centers on the violence perpetrated by a tiny sect of radicals of the world's 1.2 billion Muslims. He's saying, look, this is a very small, you know, but it's an overblown image, right? It's a focus on some area that's not indicative of 1.2 billion people. It's a tiny proportion of that. So yeah, I'm just recording right now. I'm nearly finished. I'm sorry. I'm recording right now. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I was supposed to go and get my daughter actually from my friends. This is the sort of fun that we have in the summer, but also during COVID. But anyway. So, to the question, the author explains spread across South Asia to influence the creation of Al Jazeera and many other forms. Is this spread the reason of religion or that of political ideology? Yeah, I think that maybe also takes us into a place where I do a political ideology class, and one of the things that we discussed there is like, what's the difference between a political ideology and religion, right, early on? It's quite a difficult question to answer. But, you know, usually the answer is something along the lines of that, you know, maybe a religion expects or relies on things happening from maybe supernatural things. Of course, that gets us into now a debate about what's supernatural and what's natural, right? But from things beyond this world, things that are above nature, right? Because very often they will, you know, both religions and political ideologies will have a, you know, a sort of an explanation, right? Of this is what the world is. This is what the world is. This is why things happen the way they happen. Right? Both a religion and a political ideology will have that. They'll also have an evaluation. This is the good things that are going on. This is the bad things. This is how we know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and that's both religion and political ideology. And then you've got also the orientation, right? This is your role in the world, in the plan, and you'll have that both in political ideologies and religions. And then you'll have some sort of a plan, right? Some sort of a political program. Now, the political program is obvious in political ideology. Sometimes it's more obvious than not in religion, but it depends, you know, on the religion, on the particular sect, the particular group, probably, right, about how political that is or how individual it is, right? Sometimes religions will be about individual change and growth and struggle and that sort of thing. And sometimes they might be more political. Political ideologies are usually political, right? They're asking you to act together with others in order to achieve some sort of political ends. Religions don't always have that. Sometimes they don't. And then the other thing is the types of ends that are in there, if there are any political ends or political program, platform, usually religions have more, again, supernatural involvement. Usually it's not that we're going to achieve this on our own, right? As a group, we're going to achieve this with, the help of God, deities, angels, demons, that sort of thing. Probably don't want to achieve anything with demons, but everything, you see what I'm saying? All right. So that's my excuse for not answering the question, I suppose, right? That's my excuse for not being able to answer the question. The religion and political ideology are close, they're connected. Sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between the two. And then the last part of it, does it depend on who or what is doing the spreading, influencing? And I don't know. I think what's going on here between Huntington and Katzenstein is about influence, is about spreading, is about connection across borders, across the world, across space and time. It is about all of that. And I suppose it sort of depends, in terms of answering, does it depend on who or what is doing the spreading, influencing it? It sort of, you know, it's about, again, how that's received, right? Huntington thinks that it's rejected, right? The spreading of influence is rejected and combated and fought against, whereas Katzenstein thinks that that's a normal state of affairs, that it's been going on forever, and that actually this spread of and not only is it natural and has it been going for a long time, not only is it, but it's sort of desirable, and it also, the result of it is that it leads to a world where we don't have distinct civilizations that we can box off from each other, right? Both because internally there's so much difference within civilizations, but also because there's some similarities between what Huntington's calling different. You know, so another thing that he's doing, and talking about Indonesia, is saying Indonesia is different from Arabia, right? From the Middle East, from the Arabian Peninsula. That's different. Even though for Huntington it's all in the same civilization, but it's very different history, very different beliefs, even despite the you know, them both being Muslim countries, or they have different understandings of Islam. So difference within, and then some similarities across civilizational boundaries, and so that's a result of the influence and the spread of ideas around the world that's been going on for Katzenstein for a long time. All right, so there you go. I think we came to an answer in the end on those two. I'll do 2 or 3 in each video usually, and just discuss it, and I'll try and point you to specific parts of the text usually for these clarification questions. And so this is what to expect from these videos. Do watch them. I'll put at the beginning the sort of the stuff about the main, you know, any kind of updates or sort of exhortations or encouragements about the main paper, and then at the end I'll put these this sort of my take and my sort of instruction on the clarification questions. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll do another one for the second module, so watch out for that.